Land in Abla Gemara, we are up to Masech Nedarim Daf Tes Aleph. It's Erev Rosh Chodesh Kislev. So basically, we have a machlekes between Bar Poda and Ula, based on our Mishnah, where it talks about if you said that these trees should be kodesh until they get cut down. So according to Bar Poda, two things. First of all, he says, since you said until it gets cut down, even if you redeem it, it becomes kodesh again, because your vow was it should remain kodesh, holy until the trees get cut down. That's number one. Number two is that even after it gets cut down, you still have to redeem it, because kedusha doesn't just disappear. We're talking here about kedusha's damim. The tree itself does not become, it's not burnt in mizbeach. We're talking about kedusha's damim, and that Poda goes to the extreme and says that even kedusha's damim, the thing itself is not intrinsically holy. It just has a nominal value, and that value is holy. Even so, you have to redeem it. The kedusha doesn't disappear. Ula disagrees. Ula says that if the tree gets cut down, automatically it becomes mutter. Could be he also argues on the first case that if you redeem it, if it doesn't become holy again, then I'm regarding that. And Rabbi Nuna wanted to know, according to Ula, how did it disappear? How is it different in the case of a woman who today is married and tomorrow is not married, and we know and everybody accepts. Like we're showing, try to work out how do you know why we're so certain of that. But if you say to a woman, you're married to me for a day and tomorrow you're no longer married to me, you still have to give her a divorce. In other words, kedusha can't just disappear. And Rava says, no, you cannot compare the case of a woman to the case of a carbon. Why? Because here we're talking about kedusha's damim versus the case of a woman, kedusha's aguf. There, the woman itself becomes married to you, so therefore it can't just disappear without giving her a get. Here, it's thus kedusha's damim. So Rava is saying that there's a difference between kedusha's damim and kedusha's aguf. Kedusha's aguf doesn't disappear. Kedusha's damim does. However, in the argument that we have in Ula and Padaz, and Pada holds that even kedusha's damim does not disappear. You have to redeem it after the tree got cut down. So comes along Abaye now, and he gets involved in the argument. Abaye said, "You're telling me that kedusha's aguf lepoka berda. You're telling me that if something becomes consecrated, something becomes holy, you cannot. The kedusha doesn't just disappear. Even if they gave a time period, it doesn't just disappear. You have to redeem it. That's what you're saying here, and that's you compare that to a married woman. Shenk and Amisha is talking about kedusha's damim, just the value. So that's a question. But Tanya, we learn clearly. If a person says shoyer ze oila, if a person says that this shoyer should be a carbon oila, kol hamayin for 30 days. Now, a carbon oila is consecrated, so this is kedusha's haguf. The animal has to go to the Beis Hamikdash on the mizbeach, and an oila is very strict because the entire animal gets burnt in the mizbeach. And if you use the animal while it's in waiting, you're stealing from hekdesh. But then you said ula achal, but after the 30 days, if I don't bring it up, shlomim, it should become a shlomim. So now the kedusha of the oila disappears and it goes down the step. And there comes a shlamim, which means now it can be eaten by the balabas. There's no meila. So the din is kol hamayam oila. If you brought the carbon during the 30 days, it's a tree like an oila, and if you use it for your own personal use, you're moil. But la'achal hamayam shlamim. Now the transition happened by itself. Nobody redeemed anything. Says Abaye, doesn't that prove amai kedusha haguf ninu l'chayda? Definitely this is kedusha haguf, and yet a pocket of that. We see clearly that the kedusha just dissipates on its own. You don't have to do anything. So he's asking a question of Rava. He said, "You Rava said a minute ago that kedusha guf does not disappear. The only time that it disappears is Ula is talking about is kedusha's damim. Here, I just proved to you that even kedusha guf, if you made it set it for a certain time, the time elapses, the kedusha disappears on its own. It just vanishes." Says Rava, who told you we're talking about kedusha's guf? You took this animal and you said that the value of this animal should be used to buy an oila if it's done in the first 30 days, and if you didn't, the value of the animal then should be used for a carbon shlamim. And by kedusha's damim, Rava says yes. The kedusha disappears if you made it for a certain time, a set time, like the tree. When you cut it down, it just disappears, like bar pada. The Rishonim already asked. The din is that if you take an animal and you consecrate it, even if you say clearly, I want the kedusha's damim, if it's suitable for the mizbeach, it has to become a carbon. So they all learn. One answer is that we're talking about an animal with a defect. So the animal itself cannot be brought up in the mizbeach. All you were makdish was the value. So if so, let's read the next case in that very right. It says La'achar lamed yom. What it says all the way around. This is how we read it right now. La'achar lamed yom oila. I wanted to become an oila after 30 days. Uma'achar shlamim. So I swapped it around. First, the lowest step is shlamim, the higher, and the next step is the oila, which is higher. But you mentioned the word oila after 30 days, and then you said, and now is a shlamim. And the din is the same din. If you bring it now, it's a shlamim. Bring it then, it's an oila. The question is, what's the difference? Why repeat the same din twice? Why read the same thing twice? So it says Abai, if you learn like me that we're talking about Kedusha's goof, that's why you have to say it twice. So people like you shouldn't come along and say we're talking about Kedusha's damim. So we have one case we'll say that's talking about when you nominate the value of the animal for 30 days and then you swap it the next, if you sell the animal, if I'm doing it within 30 days, the money will be used for one kind of a carbon. If I do the second set of 30 days, it'll be used for another kind of carbon. So one case is talking about Kedusha Damim, and the next case is talking about Kedusha Guf. If you only had one case, I would always argue the minimal Chiddush, which would be Kedusha Damim, the value, and then because you said it twice, I know that one case is talking about the value, one case is talking about the actual Guf. But you'd rather tell me that this entire Bryce is talking about Kedusha Guf. Why repeat the same case twice? We'll see in a minute. So the Ran said because the last thing we talked about was what do you call it? Was that the oil was the first thing it said, right? So we're saying oil again, the first thing you said, but in the next 30 days, it makes no difference the order. Yeah,
it seems like that's the difference.
But why should it be different at the moment? Why should it be different? You're right. We'll see in a minute, but exactly the opposite of what you think. In that one case is talking about Kedusha Damim, and one Kedusha Guf. I understand why you need two cases. Why? The Salkadachim, I would have thought Kedusha's Damim, Pakabeh, just swapping the word of the Gemara. Kedusha's Damim, Pakabeh, Kedusha Guf, like Pakabeh. I would have thought that if there's only one case in the Brisa, we're talking about a case of Kedusha's Damim, the value, and that's why you gave it a time period it leaves. But Kedusha's Damim, Pakabeh, I'm to loch, therefore, Tanatati. Therefore, it has to tell you two cases to tell you, and we'll ask ourselves, why does the Bryce have to repeat itself? And the only conclusion we can have is that the Bryce is coming to inform us not only Kedusha's Damim, but even Kedusha's Guf. If you set a time period, it comes to the end of that time, it's mutter. Eliyam, if you're going to tell me, and this is very different than the case of a woman. I mean, how's Abai going to explain? So Abai is trying to prove that Kedusha's Guf, the Kedusha disappears. So why a woman is different? And the words are as follows. Some of the Shainim say. Because by an animal we have Kedusha's Dam. An animal, you have two choices. You can either be makdish the value or you can makdish the animal itself. So I can argue the Kedusha's Haguf by an animal is different than by a woman. Because you have the choice of Kedusha's Dam, which we agree that it can disappear on its own. If it doesn't know. So therefore, even we make Kedusha's Haguf, because within this animal in Kedusha, it's shaykh to disappear on its own. So Kedusha's Haguf also is like a step lower, it can disappear on its own. By a woman, there's no such thing Kedusha Damim. A woman, you get married, you're married. Either you're married, you can be half married. Either you're married or you're not married. So therefore, because there's no other option, there's only option you have if Kedusha is a goof. Therefore, I understand why every day you need a divorce. You can't just say, okay, I said for a day and disappears on its own. But that's what Abai is saying here. He's saying, you rather that you're telling me that Kedusha goof, even by an animal, doesn't disappear on its own. Tell me why the Brisa has to repeat itself. What is the second case more novel? How is it more novel than the first case? You can tell me where you rather learn. The bulk is damim, lola means the tartar, wire and wool. You need two cases, hash, and furthermore, in case number one, it started out being an oiler and it ended up being a shlamim. An oiler is much stricter, right? It's totally consecrated, and yet you tell me the kedusha of the oiler disappears after 30 days, and it gets transferred to the shlamim. So surely, if you started out a shlamim and for 30 days, which is a much lower level of kedusha, it's kachim kalim. Surely it'll leave on its own. You'll move into a transition to an oilah. You can say from a higher level of kedusha, which is an oilah, and steps down to a lower level. Paka kedusha, paka the kedusha disappears on its own. Mikdusha kala kedusha chamura. You may have to tell me that it goes from a kedusha kala to kedusha chamura. Lema to have it used to the Barpada, and this is also a question not only Rav, but also a question about Barpada. Barpada said that even Kedusha Damim. Barpada said, no, even you can try to answer me that we need two reasons for Kedusha, that even though you can tell me this is Kedusha Damim, you can tell me you need two cases for Kedusha Damim, maybe what the reason what you said, either you swapped the order, whatever it is, or you said it later. But Barpada hold that even Kedusha Damim doesn't disappear on its own. He says by the tree, when you makdish the tree, it's only the value. And he said, well, this is kodesh until you cut it down. He holds after you cut it down, you still have to redeem it. Papa says, it's a totally different case here. This is what the case is talking about. Totally different than what you're saying here. He's going to say as follows. He's going to say, this is how you read it. You said in case number 2, this should be an oila after 30 days, and the first 30 days are slumming. That's not how you live. He lives all the way around. So a few words are missing. If you didn't say the first 30 days are slumming, no, the Papa says if you said slumming should be the first 30 days, then it will not become an oila the next 30 days because the kedusha of the slumming, where did it go? A kedusha le pakabirday. So no, but what? Yeah, if you said that what's the chiddush? If you said that in 30 days from now this should become an oila. If I did not mention shlamim now, it will be effective. Why would you think it isn't effective? The chiddush here is that even though I didn't make an oila today, I only said it'll be an oila in 30 days. It's challah. If I did not say that today it should be a shlamim, then all I said was la'achar lamid yom oila. Havi, it should be in just like a person says to a woman, he's got chili, gives her money, he says, but you're not Mekudesh me today, you're Mekudesh me in 30 days. The Mekudeshes, Alpha Pisha Sachlaway, even though the money's gone by then, she's Mekudesh. So the same thing here by carbon. If you said that this should be an oila after 30 days, doesn't matter where the animal is, it becomes Mekudesh.
The first 30 days is something.
Because I didn't say shlamim. Had I said, according to Papadis, I would have said shlamim the first 30 days, it would never transition to an oil afterwards because you have to first redeem it from the shlamim. Because he holds that even kedusha damim does not leave on its own. Said if that's the whole chiddush, pshita, what's a chiddush? Like the chiddush is why not? So you need knowing the hadabay. What happens day number 15? You had misgivings, or you need an animal. You say, "What? I changed my mind. I don't want it to come day number 30. It should become a oila." And the chiddush is too bad. So when do we say it's too bad? And that's the chiddush if he follows machlekes in the Gemara and Amoraim. Whether you can change between Yechon and Shlokish, whether by a woman, if let's say you say to the woman, you're Mekudesh me after 30 days, you give her money, and come day 15, he or she changes their mind. When do we say that it's considered? So the machlekes, whether Shlokish says you cannot change your mind, Rabbi Yechon says you could. So if you follow the Shlokish, you cannot change your mind. So the Bryce is telling you the same thing regarding a carbon. That by a carbon, if you said the oil should take place in 30 days, day number 15, you change your mind, too late. That's the chiddush. In fact, that's the chiddush of the Bryce. Once you fixed it, you put it into train, into motion, that's it. Who holds chayzeres, that by a woman you can change your mind, the ma'ikol member. What's the chiddush? Afilu lemanda hasam chayzeres. That's the chiddush. The chiddush is that even though when it comes to a woman kedushin, you can change your mind. Hacha shiny. Here's different. The amirasa legevoya kimisirasa lehedid. So it's a statement we have many places in Shas, and goes as follows. When normally you want to transact with a person, you have to make a kinyan. Kolzman, you didn't solidify it, didn't cement the kinyan, both of you can change your mind. But when it comes to Hegdish, if you said Amirasa Legivoyev, I said I am giving this to Hegdish, Kimisirasa, as if you gave it over. And that's why Rabbi Yechon says when it comes to Glusha, my woman, you can change your mind before it takes effect. When it comes to a carbon, once you said it should be a carbon, you can no longer change your mind. Why taka do we say Amirasa Legivoya Kim Sirasa? It's a very important thing. And interesting, it's brought throughout Shas, and we don't normally explain why. The shame don't explain why. What's the basis? Why taka? So you have a Rosh, and the Rosh says a very important Rosh. The Rosh is on the bottom of the page. The Rosh says here, 3 lines at the bottom of the page, on the left-hand side. He says here, Peter Shorosh, Shiny Hachad Amirasa Legivoya Kim Sirasa. He tells us here, what is the basis for this concept? So remember that. He says, the chayiv lekayim devar. You know why? Because you now have an obligation to fulfill your promise. Ki'ilu nada. When you talk to Hegdish, your words are like a neder. The chsiv moitzis fasecha tishma. What you utter from your mouth, you have to abide by. That's why you can't change. So the Rosh says, clearly it's a din and neder. The Rishalmi says a fascinating reason. The Rishalmi says the reason is the entire world belongs to Hashem. We had more brachas in the 6th pedic. The entire world, Hashemayim, Shemayim, Hashem, the whole world belongs to Hashem, but He gave a commission to have the chelik in this world. When I say I'm giving it to Hegdish, what I'm doing, I am walking away from my rights to this world, and I'm giving it back to Hashem. He gave me a present, ha'aretz, this animal, and I'm saying now, you know what? I'm walking away. I'm giving up. I'm renouncing my rights. So then, who does it go to? To the Eibishter. And where is the Eibishter? The Eibishter go Rachmani. Everything's the Eibishter, so therefore you gave it to him. You gave it to him. So there's a big difference between the Rosh and the Risham. According to the Rosh, I didn't give it to him yet, but I have to give it to him. According to the Risham, you gave it to me already. The nafkamin is, can you a lot of nafkamin halach? Can you change your mind? We have a rule generally. That means that you can still change your mind. You have a few seconds to change your mind. What happens over here? So if like a Shami, you already gave it to the Eibishter, you can't take it back anymore. If it's the Rosh like a Neder, well, you can take it in, but you can always change your mind. Another big machlek is in the Shayim, it's tzedakah. This is hegdish. What about tzedakah? If I said I'm going to give tzedakah, by tzedakah we don't say I'm not renouncing to Eibishter, I'm giving it to another poor person. If I said I'm going to give tzedakah next month, can I change my mind? Exactly those words. I am going to give $100 next month to this cause. Can you change your mind? Big machlek is holy right here. If you follow the Yishalma, yes, you can. Because here it doesn't follow the logic that I gave it to the Eibishter. This is between me and that person. But if you follow the Rosh, because you made a neder, you can't change your mind. Tzedakah is a mitzvah, it's a neder, you cannot change your mind. Many big knocking Allah. Okay, let's continue. Gemara. Says the Gemara, Yosef Rabbi ben Abishcha Berebi, the great man sat before Kamed Rabbi. They sat before Rabbi and Kamenamne. This seems to happen quite often. Kamenamnem, we have the Rab a lot of times, like dozing off, and the Talmidim talk. The Kamenamnem, Rabbi Yimmer was dozing off. Yasu was singing the Kama, and they said the following: The Bar Pada, according to Bar Pada, the Amor says, Padan Chayzreis v'Kaiches. Bar Pada said that if you said till the tree is cut down, it's going to be Kaidish. I redeem it sometime while the tree is upstanding. I have to then make it Kaidish again. Based on that, let's resolve the question of Haishia. What was Haishia's question? Say prutli. So a guy gives a woman a prut is enough sufficient to marry her. He gave her 2 pruts. That's what he said to her. Ba'achas, the first prutli is kachilayan. You're engaged to me today. And then I plan to divorce you. Uva'achas, the other one, he's kachili la'acha shegashicha. After I divorce you, me. Why in the world he would say that? I'm not exactly sure. But this is the kind of arrangement he has with her. So the Beisha remains the question. But based on because since I said to her, you'll be Mekudesh to me, so if you redeem the tree, you become Kodesh straight away. So yeah, as soon as I give her a get, she becomes Kodesh again straight away. Even though I gave it to her the first time around, it should be Chal. He tied Rabbi Yim, and I showed you when the Chacham was asleep, they were wide awake. Rabbi Yim woke up, and he said, "My Kamadamit, and what are you guys comparing? Podin hu podin achedim. How can you compare a case where he redeems to a case where somebody else redeems?" In other words, in the case of the tree, he's redeeming it, and it goes to Hegdish, goes back to him. Hegdish back to him. Hegdish is in control, he's in control. There's nobody else, no third party involved there. Pardon who Chayzes Kadosh. He said, if you're the one who redeemed the tree, it becomes very holy again. But Padam Achein, the moment if a third person comes in and redeems that tree, it does not become holy again because it's out of your control anymore. In other words, while the first Kodesh is there, the second Kodesh is not there yet. It's only after you redeem it, the second Kodesh kicks in. But if somebody else is now the owner, how can your second Kodesh kick in? A woman is like somebody that Krishna, she's in control. It's you are the ones giving Kodesh, but the moment you divorce her, a third party, she's in control. If she's in control, it doesn't automatically become Kodesh. It's only if he redeemed it. I'm going to quickly explain to you a very important word here. So the Ran asks here, but the woman is just like Hegdish. Over there, the moment you redeem the tree is Kodesh, it's Hegdish. You redeem it, becomes yours. It becomes Kodesh against Hegdish. So, Kodesh, there's 2 people involved there, Hegdish and yourself. It's not a problem as long as there's not a third party involved. Here, it's just you and the woman, nobody else. And the woman is agreeing with him. So what's going on here? How do you compare it to a third party? There's no third party outsider here. There's just you and the woman, and she's agreeing. She says as follows. Very important word. I asked you yesterday, why is it by Kedushin? I'm paraphrasing, he doesn't say. Why by Kedushin, by Chuppah, when the guy says to the Kala, why doesn't she answer yes? Cain, why does she say quiet? The reason is as follows. The Torah says we'll have a Kedushin there, Kiyikach ish isha ubola. A man has to make all the efforts and all the motions has to be from the man. It doesn't say Kitalokach isha lish, which would mean the same thing. If a woman is taken by a man, Isn't that the same thing? No, because kitulokach isha leish could mean a woman can have a little bit of a participation. Kiyikach ish isha means that the man does everything. So the Ran says, you know what happens by kedushin? What happens is that she walks away from her Baal Batushkai. She walks away. She makes herself happy, and therefore the man does everything. The moment she has to say yes, she's contributing to this arrangement, and that's a problem because it says ki yikach ish isha. She does nothing, so she's maskem is v'daita. This is the loss of the Ran. She's maskem. She agrees, and therefore he does everything. In our case over here, the moment that she's divorced, she's now out of it. She's a third person. She's no longer maskemedai to the trainer. So now, if you want the Kedusha to fall out a second time, she's now going to be contributing to this, and that is a problem. So that's why it's not Kedusha. You follow? So, but the main thing is he explains, which is a question you can ask everybody: why don't say yes under the Chala, under the Chuppah? Okay, so it's just interesting how you learn Gemara. Everything is mixed. If you learn Kedushin, the only source for understanding the role of a woman is this around here in the Nedarim Daf. Nowhere in Kedushin do Rishonim talk about exactly what her role is, other than she has to agree. Because hey, we'll learn that if she says, you're married to me, it's no good. Even if he gives her the ring, she contributed to the whole thing. It has to be all about him. Okay,